It is a name that resides in almost every household on the planet, from the chocolate bar in your child's hand to the coffee in your morning cup and the bottled water in your car. Nestlé's presence is inescapable. With an empire spanning over 2,000 brands and operations in nearly every country, it stands as the largest food and beverage corporation in history. For over 150 years, the company has carefully crafted an image of a nurturing, family-oriented brand under the slogan "Good Food, Good Life." However, behind this multi-billion-dollar veneer of health and wellness lies a corporate history marked by exploitation, environmental devastation, and a chilling disregard for human life. To understand the true cost of this global giant, we must look beyond the colorful packaging and examine the very foundations of its power. The most disturbing aspect of Nestlé's business model begins with the most essential element of human survival: water. In the eyes of many, water is a fundamental human right, a gift of nature that belongs to everyone. But for Nestlé, water is a commodity of blue gold, to be extracted, bottled, and sold for massive profit. The company's former CEO, Peter Baclemath, once sparked global outrage by suggesting that the idea of water as a human right was extreme. While he later attempted to rephrase his stance, the company's actions across the globe have consistently mirrored this predatory philosophy. Nowhere is the impact of this philosophy more evident than in small, vulnerable communities in developing nations. In the village of Bati Dilwan in Pakistan, the local population has felt the direct consequences of Nestlé's thirst for profit. In the late Ejojoling S. Nestlé established a water bottling plant nearby to produce its Pure Life brand. As the company's powerful industrial pumps began drawing hundreds of thousands of liters of groundwater every single day, the local water table collapsed. Wells that had served the village for generations suddenly ran dry. The villagers, unable to afford the bottled water being extracted from beneath their own feet, were forced to rely on contaminated sludge-filled remains. While Nestlé's profits soared, the children of Boti Dilwan began suffering from waterborne diseases. This is the brutal reality of Nestlé's Pure Life, a life made pure for those who can pay, at the expense of those who cannot. Nestlé, this pattern of exploitation is not limited to the developing world. Even in nations with strong regulations, Nestlé has shown a remarkable ability to bypass the law. In the United States, specifically in California, the company continued to extract millions of gallons of water from the San Bernardino National Forest for decades, using a permit that had expired in 1988. Even during record-breaking droughts, when local residents were forced to ration water and forests were dying, Nestlé's tankers remained full. They paid the government a mere $524 a year for the right to take as much water as they wanted, which they then sold back to the public for millions of dollars. The audacity to prioritize corporate bottling over the survival of a fragile ecosystem reveals a deep-seated culture of greed that permeates the highest levels of the organization. The environmental cost of this blue-gold trade is equally catastrophic. Every year, Nestlé produces over 1.5 million tons of plastic packaging. Despite their massive marketing campaigns focusing on sustainability and recyclability, the reality is that their products are a leading cause of global plastic pollution. In countries like the Philippines, the coastline is literally buried under millions of non-recyclable plastic sachets and bottles branded with the Nestlé logo. These plastics do not disappear. They break down into microplastics, entering the soil, the water, and eventually the human body. By shifting the responsibility of waste onto the consumer and local governments, Nestlé avoids the massive costs of the environmental destruction it causes. The controversy surrounding Nestlé's water extraction is only the surface of a much deeper and more sinister corporate history. Perhaps the most infamous chapter in the company's existence is the baby formula scandal of the 1970s and 80s, an event so devastating that it led to a worldwide boycott that continues in some circles to this day. In a ruthless pursuit of market expansion, Nestlé targeted some of the most vulnerable populations on Earth, impoverished mothers in developing nations. The company's marketing strategy was as brilliant as it was deadly. They employed sales representatives dressed in nurse-like uniforms known as milk nurses, who visited hospitals and villages to convince new mothers that their breast milk was insufficient and that Nestlé's powdered formula was a more modern and scientific choice for their babies. To seal the deal, Nestlé distributed free samples of the formula to mothers in maternity wards. These samples lasted just long enough for the mother's natural milk production to dry up. Once the mother was no longer able to breastfeed, the free samples stopped, and she was forced to buy the expensive formula to keep her child alive. In regions where poverty was rampant and clean water was a luxury, this led to a humanitarian disaster. Mothers unable to afford the required amount of powder began diluting the formula with large quantities of contaminated water to make it last longer. Others used less powder than required, leading to severe malnutrition. The result was a horrific spike in infant mortality, with millions of babies suffering from bottle baby disease, a combination of extreme diarrhea and starvation. Despite warnings from healthcare professionals and international organizations, Nestlé fought back against its critics for years, prioritizing its market share over the lives of infants. It took a massive global campaign and the implementation of the International Code of Marketing of breast milk substitutes by the WHO to finally force the company to change its tactics. However, the scars of this scandal remain, and many argue that the company continues to find loopholes in these regulations to this day. The baby formula tragedy proved that for Nestlé, even the life of a newborn child is a negotiable factor when it comes to the bottom line. As the company faced backlash for its impact on infants, another crisis was brewing in its supply chain, one involving the world's favorite treat, chocolate. Nestlé is one of the largest buyers of cocoa in the world, primarily sourcing from West African nations like Ivory Coast and Ghana. For decades, investigative journalists and human rights groups have documented the widespread use of child labor and even child slavery in the cocoa fields that supply Nestlé. Children, some as young as 7 or 8 years old, are forced to work in hazardous conditions, using heavy machetes to harvest cocoa pods and carrying loads far beyond their physical capacity. Many of these children are trafficked from neighboring countries, sold into a life of labor where they are denied an education and subjected to physical abuse. Nestlé has repeatedly signed international agreements, such as the Harkinanil Protocol, promising to end child labor in its supply chain, yet decades later, the problem persists. The company claims that the complexity of global supply chains makes it difficult to track every farm, but critics argue that a corporation with billions in profit has the resources to ensure ethical sourcing if it truly desired to. Instead, Nestlé benefits from the low prices that child labor helps maintain. In legal battles, the company has even argued in court that it cannot be held liable for human rights abuses committed by its suppliers, effectively distancing itself from the very hands that pick the cocoa for its multi-billion-dollar brands like KitKat and Smarties. Beyond the fields of Africa and the hospitals of the developing world, Nestlé's influence has seeped into the very fabric of global health policy. The company spends millions of dollars every year on lobbying and scientific research designed to downplay the health risks of sugar and processed foods. In many countries, they have been accused of using their financial power to silence critics and influence government dietary guidelines. By positioning themselves as partners in health, they manage to keep their high-sugar, low-nutrition products on school menus and in the homes of billions, contributing to a global epidemic of obesity and lifestyle-related diseases. This systematic manipulation of public perception and policy ensures that the empire continues to grow, regardless of the cost to the collective health of humanity. The manipulation of public health and the exploitation of labor are not relics of the past. They are evolving strategies in Nestlé's modern playbook. One of the most subtle yet dangerous ways the company maintains its dominance is through corporate capture of science and policy. Nestlé funds thousands of independent studies and nutritional research projects every year. While this may seem like a commitment to science, critics argue it is a calculated move to control the narrative around nutrition by funding research that shifts the blame for obesity from sugar to a lack of physical exercise. Nestlé protects its most profitable, sugar-laden products from regulation. In many parts of the world, they have successfully lobbied against sugar taxes and front-of-package warning labels, ensuring that consumers remain uninformed about the true contents of their food. In the 21st century, this battle for the consumer's mind has moved into the digital realm. Nestlé has transformed itself into a data-driven powerhouse. They use advanced algorithms and AI to track consumer behavior, especially targeting vulnerable demographics like new parents and low-income families. Through social media mining and loyalty programs, they know exactly when a customer is most likely to switch brands, or when a mother is feeling overwhelmed and susceptible to the convenience of processed baby food. This digital surveillance allows them to maintain a psychological grip on the market, creating a cycle of dependency that starts in infancy and lasts a lifetime. The company's environmental record in the modern era is perhaps its most glaring contradiction. While their PR departments produce glossy reports about the path to net zero and regenerative agriculture, the physical evidence tells a different story. In the tea plantations of India and the coffee farms of South America, Nestlé's demand for high-volume, low-cost production has led to massive deforestation and the depletion of soil nutrients. To keep costs down, the company often sources from industrial monocultures that rely heavily on chemical fertilizers and pesticides. which poison local waterways and destroy biodiversity. The good life promised in their slogan is built on an ecological debt that future generations will be forced to pay. Furthermore, the company's internal culture has often been described as one of aggressive intimidation toward whistleblowers and activists. There have been numerous reports over the years of labor union leaders in Colombia and the Philippines being threatened or even killed after protesting against Nestlé's labor practices. While the company denies any direct involvement in these incidents, the atmosphere of fear surrounding their operations in volatile regions is well documented. By operating in areas with weak legal systems and high levels of corruption, Nestlé can distance itself from the dirty work required to keep its supply chains running smoothly and its prices competitive. The final layer of the Nestlé empire is its mastery of greenwashing. In 2025 and 2026, as global pressure regarding plastic waste reaches a breaking point, Nestlé has pioneered plastic neutrality programs. However, investigations have revealed that many of these programs involve paying low-wage workers in developing nations to collect trash in hazardous conditions, which is then burned in cement kilns. This process, while removing plastic from the ocean, releases toxic chemicals into the air, simply trading one environmental disaster for another. It is a shell game designed to keep the assembly lines moving without making the fundamental changes necessary to protect the planet. As we look at the totality of Nestlé's operations from the dry wells of Pakistan to the cocoa fields of Africa, and from the hospital wards of the 70s to the digital tracking of today, a singular truth emerges. This is a corporation that does not view itself as a member of human society, but as an entity above it. Its scale is so vast that it can absorb scandals, pay off fines, and outlast governments. The dark side of Nestlé isn't just a series of isolated incidents. It is the logical conclusion of a business model that values growth above all else. In the world Nestlé is building, everything water, food, health, and even our children's future is for sale. The scope of Nestlé's influence is not limited to what we drink or how we feed our infants. It extends deep into the global food supply through market monopolization. In many parts of the world, Nestlé has moved to control the very seeds and raw materials that farmers rely on. By pushing for intellectual property rights on food varieties and agricultural processes, they have effectively turned traditional farming into a corporate-controlled industry. In South Asia and Latin America, small-scale farmers often find themselves trapped in a cycle of debt, forced to buy specific seeds and fertilizers from the company or its subsidiaries only to sell the harvest back to Nestlé at prices dictated by the corporation. This vertical integration ensures that the farmer takes all the risk while Nestlé takes all the profit. One of the most pervasive examples of this control is found in the instant noodle market, particularly the brand Maggi. In 2015, a massive scandal erupted in India when food safety inspectors found that Maggi noodles contained lead levels 7 times higher than the legal limit, along with high amounts of MSG that were not disclosed on the label. The company's initial reaction was not one of apology, but of aggressive denial and legal threats against the government. While millions of packets were eventually destroyed, the scandal highlighted a terrifying reality: the food being consumed by the poorest and most vulnerable populations who rely on Maggi as a cheap meal was potentially toxic. After a brief ban, the brand returned through a massive PR campaign, proving that for a giant like Nestlé, even a national health crisis is just a temporary marketing hurdle. The company's good food promise is further undermined by its role in the global palm oil crisis. Nestlé is a major consumer of palm oil, an ingredient found in everything from their chocolates to their soaps. The demand for cheap palm oil has driven the destruction of vast tracts of rainforest in Indonesia and Malaysia, pushing species like the orangutan to the brink of extinction. While Nestlé claims to use sustainable palm oil, satellite imagery and investigative reports consistently show that their suppliers are involved in illegal land clearing and the displacement of indigenous communities. The carbon released from these burning forests makes Nestlé one of the silent contributors to the acceleration of global warming. Regardless of their public net zero pledges, perhaps the most chilling aspect of Nestlé's dominance is their vision for the future of nutrition. Personalized nutrition. The company is investing billions into health science ventures that aim to link your DNA and health data to their specific food products. They envision a world where your smart fridge and wearable devices tell you which Nestlé-branded supplement or medical food you need to consume based on your biological profile. This transition from a food company to a health and wellness company is a strategic move to secure a permanent place in the healthcare industry. It raises the ultimate question of privacy. Do we want a corporation with a history of exploiting infants and draining public water sources to have access to our genetic code and medical data? As we conclude this deep dive into the empire of Nestlé, we are left with a sobering realization. The convenience we enjoy, the quick coffee, the easy meal, the sweet snack comes with a hidden ledger of human and environmental costs. For over a century, Nestlé has mastered the art of being too big to fail and too integrated to avoid. They have shown that they can weather any storm, outpay any fine, and rewrite their own history through brilliant advertising. But as the world's resources dwindle and the consequences of corporate greed become impossible to ignore, the true legacy of Nestlé will not be found in its profit margins but in the dry wells, the exploited fields, and the billions of plastic bottles left in its wake. In 2024 and 2025, a new and explosive scandal has rocked the foundation of Nestlé's good food promise, revealing a shocking double standard that separates the world's children based on their geography. An investigation by the Swiss organization Public Eye uncovered that Nestlé has been adding high amounts of sugar and honey to its baby cereal and milk brands, such as Cerelac and Nido and Low, in middle-income countries across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. However, in its home market of Switzerland and other wealthy European nations like Germany and the UK, these exact same products are sold with no added sugar at all. This is not a minor chemical difference. It is a calculated marketing strategy with devastating long-term consequences. In countries like Senegal, South Africa, and Thailand, some Nestlé baby products contained as much as 6 grams of added sugar per serving, the equivalent of 1.5 sugar cubes. For a 6-month-old infant, this level of sugar is not only unnecessary, but dangerous. By introducing sugar so early, Nestlé is effectively programming the palates of millions of babies to crave sweetness, creating a lifelong addiction to processed foods. Health experts have called this a preventable public health catastrophe, as these sugary additives contribute directly to the rising epidemic of childhood obesity and type 2 diabetes in regions where medical systems are already under-resourced. The hypocrisy of this practice is laid bare by Nestlé's own internal documents. In Switzerland, Nestlé advertises its sugar-free baby food as healthier and better for your child's development. Yet, when confronted about the sugary versions sold in developing nations, the company hides behind the excuse of meeting local tastes and complying with weaker local regulations. This revealed a chilling corporate reality. Nestlé is willing to protect the health of European children while knowingly compromising the health of children in the global south for the sake of market loyalty and profit. Even as the World Health Organization, who calls for a total ban on added sugars for children under 3, Nestlé continues to pump sucrose and honey into its products in countries where mothers trust the brand implicitly. As we move into 2026, the company is also facing a massive internal meltdown. The sudden dismissal of CEO Laurent Freeks in late 2025, following a scandal involving a breach of corporate conduct, has exposed deep fractures in the company's leadership. Investors have begun to lose faith as the company's share prices have plummeted to their lowest levels in years. This internal chaos at the Steel and Glass headquarters in Switzerland stands in stark contrast to the rigid, cold efficiency with which they extract resources from the earth. The Nestlé crisis of Arling-Arlou marks a historic turning point, where the world's largest food company is finally being forced to answer for decades of strategic missteps and ethical failures. The history of Nestlé is a cautionary tale of what happens when a corporation becomes more powerful than the nations in which it operates. From the baby killer scandal of the 1970s to the sugar scandal of 2024, the patterns remain the same. Exploit the vulnerable, manipulate the science, and prioritize the dividend. While the company now promises to phase out sugars and clean up its supply chains by 2030, many ask if it is too little, too late. The millions of discarded plastic bottles, the dried-up wells in Pakistan, and the generations of children hooked on sugar are the true monuments of the Nestlé empire. The question remains, as consumers, do we have the power to dismantle a giant that has become so deeply embedded in our daily lives?